Drew who reckons videos his videos what if Sam and Owen swap seasons. So Dylan BB 243 basically gave me a bunch of name characters and Owen Sam were one of them. So I decided to have it swap seasons because I didn't know what else to do with this. So yeah. So Sam gets put onto with the Gophers, and Heather obviously sees Sam as like very easy to manipulate. Katie and Izzy still swap teams, with of course Sam and Lindsay both befriending each other and getting on pretty well. Sam wouldn't jump because he doesn't in All Stars, and he'd be afraid of being attacked by a retro shark. But Ezekiel's still here to say his comment. Again, Heather still sabotages them free player. I think Sam and Noah would get on pretty well, and Heather would add Lindsay, Beth, and now she would add Sam into the alliance because Sam would be talking to Beth, and they would be getting on really well. There's nothing to suggest to me that the Brody and Beth relationship didn't happen in Ireland because Brody is never mentioned, so I assume that happened like during action or right after Ireland. Like there was maybe a time gap, like a few months where it could have happened. Anyway, that's nothing to do with the theory. It's just me analyzing. So, episode 4, Noah still refuses / doesn't compete, and Duncan and Harold still win the challenge. Now, in episode 5 is a bit different because Heather also wants to get. So, Cody, Gwen, and Trent. Cody votes for Shauna. Sam would be convinced to vote Justin, and Izzy was convinced in the original because Sam would be a part of Heather's alliance. And so the other 4 vote for Heather. Cody votes for Trent because then it would be a tiebreaker. So Justin still goes out like in the original. Episode 6, Keisto gets lost. And now we get into phobia factor, and I think Sam's fear would be without video games, and he would fail. But there's no reason for Tyler not to go out here. Izzy gets chased down by the CRMP, and Cody gets mauled by a bear. Beth would rebel, and of course Sam and Beth would be getting on really well. And Sam would also rebel against Beth, knowing full well that obviously he likes her, and Heather, this really knows Heather. Heather would reveal that she has the cursed statue, and Sam would think it's pretty cool. Sam would apologize on how he let her down, and Beth has no worries and promises that she'll take out Heather, and Sam says he'll try his best. In episode 11, it's still Sadie in the Who You Can Trust challenge. Instead of Owen and Lashana, it'd be Sam and Lashana, and Lashana would be talk to Sam on how to get Heather out, which of course Sam accepting, and they'd actually be getting on really well. Harold still breaks the votes against Courtney, and Harold still wipes out like he does in the original. The merge remains the same, but in this episode, we have to talk about who returns, and it's still Eva and Izzy. Now, I originally was thinking back doing Justin, but I don't think it changes anything. So episode 15, Eva gets sabotaged. Episode 16 is where Heather kisses Trent, so this would still work. I think here Sam would be annoyed more at Heather for getting rid of Trent. Episode 17, Hide Me Sneaky Challenge. Duncan would add Sam into the Guys Alliance. And of course, Sam needs an alliance member. But Sam would also realize this could be a good option trying to get Heather out. Heather still has immunity, and everyone will talk Bridget. Episode 18 is the bike race, and here we now get some actual changes in the timeline. Sam would make a decent bike, with Jeff wipes out and Gwen, Sean and Izzy go off the entire episode, and Duncan and DJ also wipe out. Lindsay crosses and Heather, but Sam isn't able to make a bike. Now the thing is, I think Sam would end up wiping out on a landmine, as he would very much like Owen crash into Duncan, meaning that Lindsay still goes here. Sam would be pretty sad he lost his only other friend, but Lindsay encourages Sam to see that he can do it, she believes in him. I states that Sam can win this season. Episode 19 is still DJ. Sam would do okay, but I don't think he would do exceptionally well. In episode 20, Izzy still shoots Heather. Sam and Duncan would bond a bit more, but nothing else really changes. 21 is still Jeff. In episode 22, I think Lashana still goes. In episode 23, non elimination. Episode 24 is guys versus girls. Now, there's an actual difference in this episode, and because Owen's not here, Sam wouldn't go after sticky muffins, so Heather and Gwen wouldn't be able to sabotage Duncan and get the map. Now, Duncan does read the map, and Sam and Duncan would actually work surprisingly well. Surprisingly, Sam and Duncan would get on really well and be good friends at this point. And I think Sam would actually even admire Duncan and see him as like the person he would want to be. And the thing is, I think Duncan and Sam would get back much faster. On top of the fact Sam's video game knowledge would help him through the challenge, as he would think this is like a RPG challenge. And while Duncan would be pretty frustrated at the fact that he thinks like this, he realizes as the days go on the challenge that Sam's helping them actually win. Chef chooses to get rid of Heather as she is the biggest threat that's not immune, and Gwen did the better in the boot camp episode. 25 is a triple dog dare you, so the Jets aren't around Owen, so it's also important to note. Sam would likely go through a lot of the dares, and he would try to tag team with Duncan because Duncan's his friend. Gwen tried out to it, but I do think Duncan has more resilience than Sam, just because of the fact that Sam is more resilient. Isn't as resilient as Duncan. And while he is determined, I think between he's determined to make promise to Lindsay, I don't think he's able to get his hair shaved off. So I think Sam ends up coming third here. Duncan and Gwen are both in the finale, and they each get witty endings. I think Sam would support Duncan, but most people support Gwen just because they wouldn't like Duncan. Jeff would support Duncan even though he would support Gwen. DJ would support Duncan, and that's kind of it. Nope, and Courtney. So now we go straight into Told, and I each get witty endings. I think Gwen would win the season just because of the fact Heather's manipulation has been mean to her. But Total Drama will simply end right there and then because Duncan or Gwen won't sacrifice the prize money. So now we go straight into Total Drama, Revenge of the Island. So I'm sorry about the Sam part, but unfortunately I don't think a lot really changes. But I think quite a bit does change in Revenge of the Island. So in episode 1, Scott would befriend Owen because I think Owen would like Scott. And Scott would be pretty annoyed by him, but see him easy to manipulate because Alejandro is annoyed by Owen and his farting and his burping, but like he still is fine, he's manipulate. And Stacey annoys her team, so she still gets voted off. Episode 2 is the opposite course. Owen would do okay, but I think Owen will befriend B as B and as he befriended Noah in World Tour. So I think him and B would actually get on very well. And I think Dawn, they would actually be good friends. And I think Dakota still gets voted off like in the original. In episode 3, not a lot changes because Scott sabotages B's murder strategy and tells Dawn that he doesn't like nature. Like, Owen can be easily convinced to vote for somebody else he doesn't want to. Like, season 1, he voted for Justin, so he didn't want to. Season 2, he voted for Trent. And season 3, you could say Tyler, but I mean, Tyler was. He lost in the challenge, so I guess not. But basically, yeah, Owen votes for me. Episode 4, Brick still swaps teams after self-sacrificing himself like he does in the original. In episode 5, Scavenger Hunt Owen doesn't really do anything. I feel like Owen and Brick would get on really well, and Scott still sabotages Dawn and calls her a thief. Now, I think Dawn would tell Owen about Scott, but Owen says he seems so nice. Pardon me. Owen says he seems so nice, so why would Scott pretend to be his friend? And Dawn does think about it that here in the confessionals that he did get rid of B, and Owen says that is true and is suspicious. Scott wants Owen's loyalty, so he makes sure that he needs to eliminate him at this point. He doesn't want to eliminate Owen at this point. Dawn still gets sabotaged, and Owen and Dawn try to convince Brick, but Brick's not having it. Lightning is low to Scott, and Scott manages to still get Dawn. Dawn says goodbye to Owen and tells him to watch his back. The fashion contest, they still make a guys' alliance, and I could see this playing out the same. Owen would try to jump the barrels, but would just keep falling, and the rats lose the challenge. Now, the big difference here is the elimination. Scott would get Lightning to vote for Brick, and he'd get Owen. Scott is able to convince Lightning to vote for Brick, but is not able to convince Brick and Owen to vote for the other. Because Owen has voted both his friends B and Dawn. In the previous episode, he voted for B, despite the fact being his friend. Again, I think Scott can easily get Owen to vote for Brick, vote for Lightning, so I think Lightning goes home. Joe and Scott swap teams, and that's kind of it. In episode 7, Brick still goes back to save his team, and Owen helps him to be. And this is a bonding arc. I actually can see Owen, befriending him in this episode. Joe would see that Owen's very easy to manipulate, so she would actually boss him around in this episode. Emery still is captured by Ezekiel, and Scott is still being Scott. In the end, Owen and Brick try to convince Owen, and Joe also tries to convince Owen to vote for Brick. Now, despite the fact that Owen and Tyler are friends, he did vote for Tyler in World Tour for costing the challenge. I could see Brick doing the exact same thing here, but Owen and Brick, I think it's more likely that Owen would vote with Brick than Owen voting with Joe, just because he's known Brick a lot longer and they are actual friends. If it was a situation where if it was Scott or Brick, Owen might hesitate a bit more because remember, Owen in this universe sees Scott as an actual friend. So I think Joe goes home. Maria still quits after the competition finding the fake diamond. Dakota's voice still returns to the game, and she gets put into the maggots. This episode is going to be a little bit different. Because they win the first part of the challenge, Owen and Brick's able to win the challenge. On top of the fact that his navigational skills, I think Brick is able and Owen are able to win, finding Gwen. But they wouldn't find Sam because he isn't being buried alive. And Dakota doesn't really have that connection. Everyone votes for Scott, but Scott still votes for Dakota's life by default, as she's the biggest threat that's not immune, and he still wants to keep Zoe as his ally. Now we're at the merge, and the only difference here is we have Owen and Brick instead of Joe and Lightning. In episode 9, Owen and Brick get captured very early on, and Scott's still riding on his own like the original. Scott's still back in life the entire episode. Cameron and Zoe are doing their thing. Owen and Brick manage to escape, but they don't betray each other. They're just traveling together for the entire episode. Scott still gets Mike voted off after once of his personalities, and because Scott can't backblame for something he's not keeping a secret, he's getting voted off here. In episode 10, Owen replaces Joe with a hot air balloon. Brick gets the hot air balloon, and Owen gets the plane. Scott would get the bird, and Owen feels bad for him. And he still does like Scott, but he thought it wasn't cool for Mike's elimination. I think Brick would win the challenge, and Owen would think to get rid of Zoe or Cameron because they'd be much easier to vote off. And Owen talks about how they should get rid of one of them because they're a duo, but Owen also says they're friends. Brick points out that they're also a duo, and that can be a problem down the line. Scott explains that if the two vote him off, they're next. Now, I think Owen would vote for for Zoe, who would be the biggest threat as not immune, as he sees a bit of B in Cameron. Brooke and Zoe and Cameron vote for Scott. Scott votes for Zoe, and Brooke's the deciding vote. I think he votes for Scott, as although Scott made a good point, he's the biggest threat that's not immune, on top of the fact that Scott is the most manipulative, and he's gotten rid of B, Dawn, and Lightning throughout the season. This shocks Owen, who can't believe Scott is eliminated, and Scott's pretty annoyed at his team. In episode 11, this is the cooking challenge, and once Brooke explains to Owen, I think Owen finally realizes that Scott was manipulative. In the cooking challenge, Owen doesn't do that well in the cooking challenge, so in the episode Owen easily wins the first part of the challenge. It's race to the end, and I think Brooke wins because his 5 o'clock jog in the morning. So Zoe does go commando like she does in the original episode, but Zoe and Cameron still work together. Actually, without Scott being, yeah. So do we? I don't think we have commando Zoe. No. So Zoe and Cameron vote for Owen, and Brooke and Owen vote for Cameron, who would be the easiest to beat for Owen in a tiebreaker. I think in the end, Cameron loses the tiebreaker and is eliminated. In episode 12 is the Who You Can Trust is the fire plan episode, and Zoe gets the map and Brooke and Owen. Owen and Brooke are traveling together, and Zoe gets by herself. But I think Zoe would win the challenge because without Cameron being attacked by the fire plant, there's no reason for her to turn around. I could easily see Brooke turning around to save Owen in this episode and would rather save his friend than win the challenge. I think Zoe would rather take Owen to the end than Brooke, because Brooke's a lot more physically athletic, on top of the fact he jogs a lot faster, and it's more of a physical threat than Owen. Owen is a powerhouse shown as a party dude, but Brooke is a physical threat. I think Zoe and Owen are both in the finale, which leaves them getting winning endings. The FP shows down 3 seconds, and that's it. Thank you guys for watching. This is the Mission Season 1 gone. And yeah, peace farewell.